a whole bunch of it is going on. A whole bunch of stuff is going on. So, if you're out there, give me a thumbs up and a 5x5. And I've looked at the major news feeds for the web to save you some time. And the best ones are Full Spectrum Survival for the most up-to-date. Brad and Kelly at Full Spectrum Survival. So, Brad is a straight shooter. He's somewhat energetic in his presentation. Brad and Kelly seem like good people. And then you have Monkey Works, MONKEYWERX. And his video is like from 3 days ago, but it's still very much apropos. So I suggest you go to Full Spectrum Survival and then to Monkey Works if you want a quick situation report on the real deal. And the real deal is what's going on down in Texas. And the admin is having an exercise down there to flex their muscle. And they're sending a whole bunch of tanks down there, presumably to be another Jade Helm exercise. So they're very probably going to have Black Hawk helicopters and all of these guys rappelling from the helicopters to stir up the population and scare them into submission. Because after all, what do you do? What do you do with your own population when you can't BS them anymore? And they know that you're a 50-year consummate politician and liar and plagiarist, and nobody takes you seriously anymore. And you've done an excellent job, but you've done an excellent job of destroying this once great country, and it grieves me. It grieves me for you young people that think that just handing this country over to a global third party that you don't know very much about, you can't vote out of office, and you're saying to yourself, well, that way it'll be bloodless. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you tell a whole bunch of people who have worked and sweat and spent their lives building what they have. What's up? You tell people who have worked and sweat and spent their lives scraping together to get what they have, and now you have illegals coming in and they're camping in people's backyards and using their water hoses, and then the people call the cops, and the cops say there's nothing they can do about it. You just got to let the people camp out. So, yeah, it says adult content tonight. So if that's not your cup of tea, I suggest, you know, but if you want to hang around, hang out with Pop Pop, you're certainly welcome. And a whole bunch of stuff is going on. So, TNVOL gal. I have no idea what that handle means. But hi back to you. So, when all the BS doesn't work anymore, and the press secretary at 1600 Pennsylvania, I'm tolerable, thank you. The press secretary, who's another consummate liar, a lady who looks like she's got a nest of Tennessee, a lady who looks like she's got a nest of bagworms in her hair. She's another consummate liar. I haven't been down to Tennessee in years. My buddy Chuck and I went down to visit his family, and his family was very rich. They had a large piece of land with 5 junk cars in the front yard. 5 junkers. So we head on down there in his Malibu, and we go into a family restaurant, and the lady comes up, and being from the Washington area, you know, you wouldn't dare call people sugar or honey bun or anything if you were a waiter or waitress in the Washington area. But the lady came up, "Hey, sugar, sit down, sugar. What can I get you to drink?" And so we had to go for the sweet tea. And so they brought us water and these big glasses of sweet tea. And then the lady was really friendly with Chuck and I. And, asked where we were from and all. We were like Washington area, down here visiting family. And she started to bring out all these samples. And I told her, I said, "Ma'am, we didn't order any of this stuff." She brought out ambrosia and sweet potato salad, which is like sweet potato consomme. All of this little dishes of stuff for us to try. And so it was a very big, heavy meal. And we just kind of tried a little bit of this, tried a little bit of that, had a good slow time eating our food. And I gave her a big tip at the time. And I think it was like $5 or $10 tip I gave her. And I told her, "Look, Linda, $5 American." And gave her the tip. She was delighted. Young gal, you know. And I think she made like, as I recall, she made like $1.23 from the restaurant an hour plus tips. I seem to recall that in the conversation. So, in any case, Chuck and I rolled down to his family's house, and one part of the family, hey, hungry, one part of the family had a very rich house, 60s style, 3 junk cars in the front yard. And then we went to this other part of the family, and the house was very run down. That was a house that had 5 junk cars in the yard. And elderly lady who was variously abled, about a good 70, 75 years old, and didn't say a word and just sat there petting this doll and looking off into the distance. And in any case, they wanted to give Chuck a picture. And when they took the picture off the wall of the family, the whole, oh, okay. So Hungry is having cinnamon donuts. Don't eat too many. You know, the cinnamon has a reason for them putting cinnamon on a sugary donut, is to keep the sugar from impacting your body all at one time. So if I eat cereal in the morning and it's like Honey Nut Cheerios, I put a good dose of cinnamon on it so that it doesn't spike my sugar. And another thing I learned to do was when I went to, it was either Denny's or IHOP, and I would get a great big glass of their wonderful lemonade. I learned that if you put a couple of drops of oil in the lemonade, it keeps the sugar from slamming your system all at once. And so I ordered my lunch, and then I asked the waitress for a bottle of oil. And she said, oil? I said, yeah, you know, like the oil you put on a salad, you know, and they got those sitting on the counter. So she was watching me, and I put 3 or 4 drops of oil in my lemonade, and she was like, you know, a horse that was scared after a WAR. And she was like that. And she asked me why I was putting oil in my lemonade. I explained to her it keeps the sugar from zapping your system too fast. And, you know, you can't even hardly taste it. But if you take too much lemonade and too much oil, that's not good, because it can give you a gallbladder attack, or it can make you pass a whole bunch of gallstones, which can be very painful. So, and when you read about that stuff like Dr. Clark's gallstone flush, Hulda Rieger Clark, German doctor, she wrote a very good book, The Cure for All Cancers. And when I was going through that with my Lance Armstrong, and I went and I had radiation one time, and man, when they flipped that switch, it was like somebody stabbing me in the abdomen with a fiery hot sword while I was being electrocuted at the same time. So I was like, to heck with that. I'm going to go the natural route. I'm not getting the radiation again. And I was sitting outside the hospital, you know, praying that God would spare me the experience. I called my pastor, a dear lady, Pastor Adams. And Pastor Adams was kind of cool because she was a pastor, but she was also packing heat. She always had a pew-pew in her purse. So I thought that was kind of cool that my pastor was packing heat. So I called Pastor Adams and I said, I'm sitting outside of the hospital getting ready to go in and have radiation. What do I do? She said, well, you go in and you go through it. So Like I said, I've made the choice of not to do that again. And here I am, the better part of a century old. I don't suggest that you do it because that was a long time ago when options were very limited, and they have a whole bunch of different treatments now. But I decided to do the wormwood and black walnut and clove treatment out of Dr. Clark's book. And then I did the I did the gallbladder flush. And see, I believe that when you have parasites and things in your body, the way the body takes care of it is it encapsulates the problem. And I don't believe that gallstones, this is my personal belief, I don't believe that gallstones are formed in the gallbladder. I believe that they're formed in the biliary tubing of the liver, and then they drop down into the gallbladder. But in any case, I did the gallstone flush, and I wound up with the gallbladder full of stones as big as an orange, and wound up in the emergency room. And I passed a whole bunch of gallstones, but the duct and everything got clogged up, and it felt just like I was walking along. I had gone to Houston's to have this marvelous meal because I was flush with cash back then, driving a block-long Olds Toronado with the telephone and the color TV in it. And the color TV saved my ass in Delaware in the fog because the taillights had gone out on the Oldsmobile, and I was driving along in the fog, and a cop car pulled up behind me, turned his lights on. He said, Mr. So-and-so, do you realize that your car is totally invisible in the fog except for the children in the back seat watching the color TV? That was the saving grace, was the kids watching cartoons in the back on the color TV. But another miracle that happened, my phone was based in Washington. And it was the old phone. You pick up, you go, Washington, WAL 767, back. And Washington goes, number, WAL 767, number, please. You give them the number, and it's half duplex. And so when you're talking, you hold the handle down, and then you have to coach the other person not to talk at the same time because you can't hear both sides of the conversation because you're talking on a radio. It's not really a phone. It's a radio connected into the phone system. So I used to call my father, and my father would always try and talk before I lifted the talk bar up. I had to coach him, and then he got smart alecky with me, and he would say Roger, Dodger, and over and out and everything. He caught on finally. But I was in Delaware in the fog, and I had every kind of headlight and fog light turned on. You couldn't see 2 inches in front of you. And this pickup truck had hit another truck head on, and it was a ghastly scene that I pulled up on. I put on the flashers, and I had a yellow plug-in emergency light because I wasn't stupid. And so I put the emergency light on the top of the roof of the car and plugged it in so it had a yellow flashing light in the fog because I didn't want to get slammed in the ass by a tractor trailer. And I said, God, what do I do? What do I do? The radio's Washington. I'm in Delaware. And this was a stone miracle. I said, Washington, WL 767. Washington answered. Now here I am down in Delaware. I said, Washington, I'm in Delaware on highway such and such, and there's been a horrendous head-on collision, and Washington heard me. And Washington called the Delaware State Police, and the police came with the ambulances and all to clean up the mess. And so I left the scene, I didn't talk to anybody or anything. I just didn't want to be there sitting in the fog. So I left the scene, and when I got to the end of the intersection, there was this foo, and I had overrun the intersection, and the tractor trailer passed the front of the Oldsmobile by about 2 inches. I almost became a casualty in and of myself. And so I was driving along, and I thought a bee had stung me on the leg. And long story short was I had installed the fog lights without a relay. And the way I should have installed them was the fog lights going right to the battery, a few inches of wire, and going to the fog lights. But I ran the wire all the way into the inside of the car and then all the way out to the fog lights. So it made this great big resistance, and the wire got hot and melted off the insulation and dropped on my leg and burned the crap out of my leg before the lights blew the fuse. So I'm sitting there in this horrendous fog, and thank God the headlights didn't blow. So I had the headlights and my yellow cigarette lighter light still, but no fog lights. So I had to find a place to pull in and wait out the fog. Very creepy when you're in a dense fog like that, and you feel like something is going to reach out and grab you, and you're wondering if somebody's going to run into your car. But I got to tell you, fam, having one of those, now you're not allowed to have red and you're not allowed to have blue in my state. You can get a ticket for that. But having one of those yellow emergency lights in your car, that is money in the bank. I can tell you, it saved the day. But I loved living in Delaware for the short time that I did. I went down there to start a business and lost the shirt on my back. I had $70,000 of seed money, which was gone in a month and a half. Everybody I tried to do business with down there made deals behind my back and dealed me out of everything. So I had tried to put a deposit down on some land in an industrial park, and I did everything backwards and just lost the shirt off my back, literally, and ended up having to sell the Tornado for just like $500, I recall. And it was a gift to the Magi Christmas, because the gift to the Magi is where this lady sells her hair, And then the husband had bought her one of those Spanish hair combs to put in her hair, but the lady had already sold her hair. So I had a camera outfit that was very, very professional, and the Oldsmobile, because I came down from Washington flush with cash in this beautiful block long car with the color TV and the radio. And so I literally sold the Oldsmobile for $500 to a junk dealer. And all the hillbillies were leaning out of the, "What's up, Isis? How are you?" All the hillbilly guys were leaning out of the car going through town, blowing the horn like they were in a parade. And long story short, my sister-in-law bought me this beautiful camera strap, like a bandolero that a bandit would wear. But the thing was, I had sold the camera to a pawn shop, and so I didn't have anything for the camera strap to go to. I didn't have the heart to tell my sister-in-law. So I bought oil for the house, which was an enormous bill, because we had rented a room in back to, we had rented an apartment in back of the house to this young person, and we did not know that their thermostat ran off of our furnace. So we were freezing, keeping our thermostat low, and the young person in the apartment was actually using more money in oil to keep their apartment nice and toasty warm, even when they were at work. They didn't turn the thermostat down. So I didn't find out until the tank of oil was empty again what the deal was with the apartment in back. So it actually turned out to be cheaper to not rent the apartment anymore to people who didn't know how to behave themselves and be conservative and respectful of the utilities that were included. I learned a lot of lessons in Delaware. So I had no job, no car, and I thought about actually walking out into the ocean and just walking out into the ocean and keeping going and disappearing myself. But for some reason, I went into the Mennonite diner. I had 35 cents left. This is a stone miracle. And I had 35 cents. I bought a newspaper, and in Dover, Delaware, it had an ad for a salesperson for a trash company. They needed a sales rep. So that was right up my alley. That was my last job, was being a sales rep for a company in Washington. So I had a dime left, and I put the dime in the phone and got the operator. I called the company Collect and talked to the owner's son. And he said, "Well, if you are such a good salesman and all, why are you calling my company Collect?" And I told him about trying to start the business, and he was like, "Oh, you're the guy from Washington that everybody sucker punched, that everyone's talking about." So in any case, I had him call my old boss in Washington, who gave me a breathtakingly excellent recommendation. And I borrowed my brother and sister-in-law's 74 Monaco with 250,000 miles on it. And we couldn't take the kids. We couldn't leave the kids. So we took the kids with us. And during the whole interview, the kids were running around the man's desk. But I had made a very good mistake. I went into this one office, and there was this very smelly old man in overalls that smelled to high heavens, and the overalls were garbagey and had paint on them and all of this other stuff. And I addressed him as sir. I said, "How are you today, sir?" And it turned out he was the owner of the company. He was the old man who owned the company with very poor hygiene and wore the same clothes every day and didn't brush his teeth. And his son looked like James Corbin or Corbett, the evangelist. And he was more, he was better spoken than the father. But in any case, they hired me, and I told him, I said, "I just need a couple of things." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "I need a company car and a check for about $400 to buy some new shoes and stuff." And he said, I got a car for you. I'll give you $200. So he gave me a check for $200. And he said the company car is a Datsun. And I was like, oh, gross, a Datsun. When I got out back, it was a Datsun 280Z sports car with red leather and a T-top. And I went back down to Georgetown, Delaware, blowing the horn on the Datsun, waving the check through the T-top with my sister-in-law behind me in the Dodge. And we had a celebratory chicken dinner that night, which we hadn't had in months. And I started working for them. But little did I know that the two companies up in Dover were in a WAR, a bidding war. So in any case, I always did business fair and square, but I was very precise in my business. And I would see every possible customer there was in the area, every single one. And so I went to this one customer's alley, and they had a very unusual dumpster. So I was measuring it in the back alley to see how many cubic yards it was to give the people a price. And all of a sudden, there were these two shadows of these two farm boys, immense farm boys with straw hats. And they were both drinking a beer, and one was drinking some J&B. And they were talking to each other, and they said, "What do you think he's doing?" And the other guy said, "Well, I think he's fixing to pick on Bobby's business." And so the one guy turned to me and he said, "Mister, you better measure your fat ass and see how well it fits in your little rice burner and get the blank out of here." And so I said, "No problem. I can always come back. You can't," I was bold. I said, "You can't watch it forever." So I took off onto the highway with this pickup truck with this toothless farm boy right behind the Datsun. And he had one of those welder's caps with the circles on it. And he was behind the steering wheel going, hee, 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 like he was going to push the Datsun. I went into third gear up to 75 miles an hour, fourth gear to 120, and fifth gear over 120. And the speedometer went to 160. And I was on the part of the highway that had concrete Jersey walls. So I figured that there couldn't be any cops or anything lying in wait because there'd be no place to hide. And so I left the pickup truck in the dust, and I waved at him through the T-top. I didn't give him the finger. I waved at him. Bye, fellas. And so the Datsun was shaking. And the reason it was shaking was it had been parked so long that the aluminum wheels had gone flat on one side, because the wheels technically are liquid, like glass is a liquid. And so the car being parked for so long made the wheels go out of balance. And so when I went up, over 120 miles an hour, the car started to shake and vibrate like it was going to fall apart. But it did keep me from getting my butt kicked. So in any case, the rival company had borrowed like $60,000 to try and stay afloat. And unbeknownst to me, my company was using me as a cudgel to solicit the other company's business to the point where they would collapse. And so one night, our trucks just magically caught fire. 3 of our trucks caught fire from a bottle of gas tossed over the fence by accident, that kind of thing. And then I'm trying to think what happened. I met they had what was called a trash man's bull roast. And that's where all the garbage collectors get together from the different companies, and they eat barbecue and all that other stuff. And there was this one guy there I didn't like at all. And he asked me, he said, what number should I play on the blackjack wheel? And I said 6. And wouldn't you know it, 666 came in, and the guy won a huge amount of money and came back up to me and said, thank you. And when he told me 666 had come in, I was like, well, no doubt, because the guy was a devil. And then another man who owned another business, his son came up in overalls, and he was like, I wanted to meet you face to face. You're the guy who's trying to put us out of business. I said, I don't know anything about that. I was hired as a salesman, and I just go and I talk to people and do my business. But what he was saying was that things were about to get extreme. And he was a bulky guy. His father, even though his father owned the company, his father put him on the back of a garbage truck to teach him the lesson of hard work and climbing the ladder to the top. And they were not about to just hand their business over, especially to an outsider. To everybody in Delaware, I was an outsider from Washington. And so I'm trying to think of what happened next. We had the accident of where our trucks caught on fire. And then the company that borrowed the $60,000, instead of selling out to the people that loaned them the money, they paid the money back, and they sold out to the company I was working for. So I came in on a Monday morning, and there were all of these trucks from another company mixed in with our truck, and they didn't need a salesman anymore. So I literally sold myself out of a job. But in the meantime, the other company, having been bamboozled, loaning the third company the money and not getting the business, just getting the money back and being played for a chump, they were angry as a nest of bees. So they put out a contract on me. And they don't play. They don't play. I worked for mob-owned companies when I was a kid. And this one guy in the company was trying to start a union. He wanted to be a big union boss. And in any case, I was very young at the time. I was 15, and I was on the back of a garbage truck. I'd wanted to be a doctor, but my father kicked me out of the house because I was getting so bulky and so beefy. He was afraid that I would retaliate for the times of him kicking me down the stairs or crushing a cigarette out on my belly. Lifting my shirt up to crush his cigarette out on my belly like it was no big deal, like I was his ashtray. Among other things he did to me, putting snakes around my neck and stuff like that, showing me the love. But in any case, I worked for this company, and back then, they didn't use plastic bags for garbage. People dumped the garbage in their can in a paper sack raw, and then they put lime on the garbage to knock the smell down. And there it coalesced in the hot sun in these huge, heavy trash cans that weighed as much as a Buick. And you got dropped off at the curb and you walked up behind the house and you had all of these burlaps wrapped around your belly and your shoulder. And this one lady at the restaurant said in my brown uniform that I looked like a baked tater. So she called me Tater. And we would go into this restaurant in the morning to get our coffee and egg sandwich. And Barbara would say, "Damn it, Tater, you in here eating again, boy? You in here eating again, Tater?" She always gave me a hard time. So they dropped you off behind the house. And if there were extra men needed on the route, they would put the older men up in the front of the truck. And then the younger men would have to ride in the back of the truck, sitting on the garbage in traffic while people came by and held their nose and pointed at you or rolled the window down and yelled, "Why is the company throwing you out? Aren't you any good workers? You know, why are they putting you in the garbage?" And you had to endure that as you sat at a traffic light sitting on piles of garbage in the back of the truck. And then you got out and you rolled these burlaps up and you rolled them around your shoulders and your belly, and they dropped you off and you walked up to the houses behind the house and put the burlap on the ground and dumped the garbage in the burlap. And then you pulled the edges up of the burlap, swung it onto your shoulder like Santa Claus, and walked crooked down the driveway back to the truck. And in the meantime, all of the garbage juice would drip down your neck and your back into the crack of your butt. And a lot of the trash men had these horrible sores on the back from the burning of the lime and the garbage and everything. Had these horrible open wounds and sores on their backs. And so to avoid that, I always wore the top of a raincoat, even in good weather, so that the garbage juice would run down the top of the raincoat into the crack of my butt or onto the ground. And I looked like a real fool in these brown coveralls and sneakers and a raincoat when it wasn't raining. And then you had to snap the burlap into the truck and whip it back so that the stuff wouldn't fall on the ground. And usually you get a splatter in your face of old canned cat food and baby diapers and milk bottles and stuff like that. And then you put the rag on the truck and drove up to the next stop to do it all over again. And by that time, the rags were all juicy with, a week's worth of garbage on them. And that was my childhood. And like I said, I'd wanted to be a doctor, but I made the mistake of when my father kicked me out, I went downtown and went onto the street with prostitutes and drug addicts and alcoholics and stuff. All I had to do was walk next door and tell my neighbor what happened. She would have let me stay in her basement. I could have worked something out with her, and she would have seen that I finished college and became the doctor that I wanted to be. I worked for 2 garbage companies, lived on my own, and went to college at night taking business administration and management courses. And whenever I visited my family, I always made sure I showered, put on clean clothes, and they would put a beach towel on their furniture because the garbage man was coming for a visit. And I had to sit on a beach towel on their furniture. My father invited me to his Kiwanis meeting, which is a poor man's Rotary Club, and, a civil club. And my father was not a very big bather. He took a bath on Saturday, whether he needed it or not. So I would usually talk to Dad like, "Hey, Dad, how are you doing, Pop? Is everything okay?" And he had this old kickback chair, whatever you call them, easy chairs. And my little nephew went up to give Granddad a hug, and he got a whiff of the chair, which smelled like ass. And the kid threw up on my father in his chair. It was that bad. So I go to Kiwanis with him, and this fly comes over to our table, and Buck tells everybody in Kiwanis that it's because his garbage man's son is sitting at the table, not because of the other guy who hasn't had a bath in a week is sitting there. So I was like, okay, I'm never going to see these people again. I joined Rotary Club, which was a rich man's club. And we're sitting there and they're having a meeting. And they said, okay, we're going to take up a collection for this cause. And there are all of these very important people there, owner of a newspaper and all these big businessmen. And at Kiwanis, they would take up a collection and you would throw $5 or $10 or $20 in the plate. At Rotary, they said, okay, we want y'all to get out your checkbooks and write us a check for $1,000. I was like, $1,000, So I wrote a very small check and then they never saw me again, because I was a Rotary Club newbie and a one-timer. But I didn't have $1,000 a month to kick into Rotary Club. So in any case, going to college got me off the back of the garbage truck and got me a supervisor position in an air-conditioned pickup truck. But getting back to the company in Delaware, some of the men came up and they said, you know, there's a contract out on you. And I said, how much? They said, well, not enough to make it worthwhile, to KILL you, at least not to your friends, $1,000 or $2,000 contract. And like I said, I knew that these guys didn't play, because when I worked for the one mob-owned company when I was a kid, I was in the shop waiting for my truck to be repaired because they had problems at the gate with scabs coming in. And some of the trucks that had their brakes cut and stuff like that. I was waiting for my truck to be repaired, and this guy was leaning on the mechanics counter, espousing the joy of working for a union. And the mechanics counter was this steel table, and they put brake parts and stuff on this steel table to work on them. And Big Boss Man came in. What are you guys doing here? I said, well, I'm waiting for my truck to be repaired so I can go back out on my route. The other guy didn't have a good answer. And Big Boss Man picked up this rubber mallet that was essentially a hammer with a big rubber, hammer on top that they banged parts onto the trucks that you didn't want to hurt with a regular hammer. We used to use them as on hubcaps when I worked at the gas station. But then the real macho guys would just use their hand, and you get a big scab on your hand here from pounding hubcaps on the cars, that type of thing. So in any case, he said, well, what are you doing here? Are you working? What are you getting ready to do? And the guy was like, well, I'm just hanging out. And so the boss is twiddling the hammer, and all of a sudden he takes it and he goes, bang, onto the guy's hand where he had his hand on the metal counter. Bang! And the guy goes, ah, puts his hand in his mouth and sucks on his hand. And the boss says, well, you're right-handed, right? So that shouldn't be a problem for you, but you need to get back to work. And the guy went out of the shop, pretty much the guy disappeared after that. So he probably wound up in the landfill with about 17 tons of garbage piled over top of him. I never saw him after that. I never asked. I wasn't stupid. So back in Delaware, the guys came up to me, and it wasn't the first time that it happened, that type of thing had happened. But like I said, I did good, honest business, and I didn't know that I was being used as a cudgel to thump this other company, and they wanted to thump somebody back. So the men told me there was a contract out on me. I told my sister-in-law, who has balls like a, I don't know, she got some kahunas. And she really had everything under control. She got a U-Haul van and helped me pack up. Before I went bust, I had a house in Delaware, and I hung out at my brother's house, and I had an apartment in Middleton. I had an apartment in Middleton, Maryland, and I stayed at the Thunderbird Hotel. So I was spending all this money on housing, and all of it had to be packed up. The one house I owned, I had a renter in, so that was no problem. But I had to pack all of my stuff in the U-Haul, and we didn't have any room. And it really was foolish of my sister-in-law and I to bring her little child along. But I put my dog in the back of the U-Haul, and every time we would take off in traffic, I would hear the dog go, oh, oh, in back with the furniture. But that was the only way I could keep my dog. So I'm riding back to the trash company 11 o'clock at night, all nervous. And for some reason, I decided to shave. I decided to shave while I was driving, and I'm shaving and driving. And my little nephew got car sick and threw up all over the right side of the Datsun, the 280Z. And so I didn't have time to clean it up or anything. I pull into the yard, and there was a security guard there. Never seen him there before. I guess the company got tired of their trucks accidentally catching on fire. And so I pulled the car up to the gate. I said, even though it was a security guard, I said, evening, officer. I threw the keys in the car and locked the door. My sister-in-law pulled up in the U-Haul van with the lights turned off. And I opened up the door, jumped in, and I said, drive, drive, like that. And man, she took off onto the highway with just the parking lights on, like a bat out of you know where. And the poor dog was in the back of the van. Oh. His name was Radar because he always took his ears like that. When you talk to him, you go, Radar, he'd go, oh. So, very smart dog. He had one blue eye and one brown eye. I thought he was blind. I didn't know he was part wolf. Very smart. I would be at the table eating like a ham sandwich. Radar would come up and he would put his tongue out and drip drool, and it would gross me out. And I'd be like, just take the sandwich. You have it. I would lose my appetite. Very smart dog. But we took him back to Maryland, and I was oh so happy to cross that Bay Bridge, never looking back, and hoping that I got out of Delaware before I got capped. And years later, the same thing happened to me down in Washington. I worked for a guy that wanted to get rid of me, and I was much older, and he would make me, as a supervisor, shovel garbage truck dirt in the heat from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. And the men came out and they gave me Gatorade, and they said, you know, he wants you out of here. Either he wants you to quit or be fired, or he wants you to drop. And so they had a junk pile, and the boss wanted me to stand under this 2,000-pound garbage truck blade and guide it into an open body truck on this little chain. I drew the line. I said, no, sir. I said, you know, I'm not a fool. If that chain breaks, then I'm flattened like a bug. I said, no, sir. Write me up, send me home. I'm not standing under a 2,000 piece of steel with this little chain. So that didn't end well, and I ended up leaving. I was so upset the day that I left. I opened the car door so violently that it broke the hinge on the car door on my brand new little Cavalier. But that's another story. But I left Delaware, never going back. And then I found out that the guy DIED, and I was relieved, because that was that. Never went back to Delaware after that. I used to love going to the beach down in Rehoboth and Lewis and all of that other stuff. But after they put the contract down on me, never went back. The Delaware prison was one of my accounts with the trash company in Delaware. And I pulled into the prison, and this was way back when patriots were upset about the influx of Japanese and foreign cars into the country, that you stole my job thing and buy American, be American. So I pull into the prison, and they shut these big steel folding gates. Very ominous thing to have happen. I went in to talk to the warden about repairing his compactor for the prison. And he looked out the window. He said, "That's one of them rice burning Jap cars you got." I said, "Well, warden, it's my company car. It was issued to me." He said, "Well, we don't go for that. This is America. You live in America. You should drive an American car." He said, we might find something in the trunk of your car." And this wasn't a good thing to say. I said, "Well, warden, it's a hatchback, sir. It doesn't have a trunk." "Anyway, we might find something in your car. Don't get smart. You might be a permanent resident." So I said, "Warden, I'll take care of thank you for the advice. I'll take care of the repairs to your compactor, make sure they're done." Went down to the Datsun and literally had it like right at the nose of the gate, waiting for the doors to unfold just enough for me to zip through and get the heck out of there. So that was my Delaware experience. In any case, fam, it's coming up on another medicine time. When you get to be my age, it's like every 45 minutes or so, you got to check your pulse and make sure you're still alive. But do me a favor, if you haven't, hit that like and subscribe, share. I'm almost at the point where I can monetize my channel and be able to afford, a few extra diapers and false teeth and hemorrhoid cream and all that other god-awful stuff. Eye drops and ear drops and nose drops. All that stuff you need when you get older. And don't forget my Amazon link and PayPal link if you want to be a blessing, get a blessing. But I got to go, fam. I love you. God loves you more. Poppy Pops out.